You're listening to RetRead Podcast. I'm Anna.
I'm Serge, and we're here to talk about books we've read.
Hope you enjoy. What's up, Serge?
Hey, Anna.
Looks like we're recording another episode of RetRead Podcast.
Yeah, this is a really exciting one. We just got done reading The Brightest Fell.
It's the latest book in the October Daye series by Seanan McGuire. It's book 11.
And you may have heard us talk about this in a previous episode where this is the 11th book and we're just jumping in it. Anna actually already reviewed the first book in the series,
Rosemary and Rue.
I just finished reading this book. It's the 11th book in the series, and you can definitely feel that there's a long story behind this book. Definitely for those of you who've read this series before and come into this book, it's going to be a hit parade of great memories and shout-outs to things that come back. In fact, after having read this book, I kind of want to read some of the previous books now because some of the material there, some of the hints were pretty enticing. For example, the story of Blind Michael. Yeah, I want to go back and read that book. I want to see how that went down. That sounds really badass.
Oh yeah, for sure. You're right that it does seem like there's a lot of callbacks to previous books, and that's interesting. In my review of Rosemary and Rue, one of my main complaints was that it felt like Seanan McGuire was dropping bait for a series to come. It's interesting now for book 11, all those things that she was dropping as bait, all that stuff has happened, and now I'm just reading the background of it. And I guess I'm more okay with expository backstory than I am with expository setup.
I found this book pretty easy to get into. It's already a lot like one of the fandoms I'm in, which is One Piece. For those of you that don't know, it's kind of just a really long animated series and also Japanese comic series. It's got a main hero and he's on a quest, and then the whole thing is basically he's got his friends that are very dear and important to him and he'll do anything to protect them. Very similar themes in this book where you have the main hero, in this case October Daye, who is a half fairy, half human knight.
Changeling.
That's the term they use for it. She's got one foot in both worlds, and she uses that to her advantage, much to the chagrin of the various purebloods, hoity-toities that don't see her coming. There's some nice butt-kicking going on in this book, if you're into that kind of thing, and I am. And so I really enjoyed it very much. I probably would have enjoyed this book even more if I'd read it back when I was a young lad in high school. It's just a pretty exciting, raucous adventure book, and I think people that age are even more into that kind of thing. But for me, even today, I don't read much, but this thing was a page turner. As soon as I got into it, I finished it in 2 sittings, and I couldn't put the thing down. That was pretty cool.
And you said it's pretty accessible for someone who hasn't read any other books in the series?
It is very accessible. It'll hook you. It'll make you want to pick up at least 2 of the previous books. You'd have to do a little research and figure out which one the whole Blind Michael thing happens in. There's a couple other things that slip now, but I would definitely want to look into as well.
So for those who don't know, what's the story about?
The hero of the story is about to get married, and she's having her bachelorette party in downtown San Francisco at this really happening karaoke club. She starts out being all like, oh, I hate hanging out at parties and, whatever. But by the end of the night, she's actually having fun. She's enjoying being with all her friends. When she comes home, she's in for a nasty surprise. Her estranged mother shows up and basically threatens her, kidnaps her lover and her sister's girlfriend, and demands that in return, she track down her long-lost sister who's been gone for more than 100 years. She's just been up partying all night. Now she has to go and set out on an epic quest. It just really jumps right into it. But the party is a great way to introduce a bunch of characters. In that sense, if you haven't read the series before, you show up at this party, everybody gets introduced, and you know right away what's going on. It's a really nice way to start off a book to bring in the new people and also catch up the old people. The people that have been with the series the whole time are going to be at this party going like, oh yeah, I get that joke. Oh yeah, that's funny. Aha, he's doing that. Oh, I don't believe it, So I think it really works on multiple levels.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a good way to start the book, and it's a way to introduce characters without bashing your head in with facts, which is the main difference between this book and the first book, where I felt like she really felt like she needed to explain who the characters were, whereas in this introduction for different characters, it was very natural.
For me, somebody who hasn't read the first book, I think that kind of approach to the first book makes sense because what I sense here is an evolution of October's self-view. In this book, many times she talks about how she knows who she is now, and she's comfortable in her own skin, and she remembers back to the days when she didn't know who she was, or wasn't sure who she wanted to be. At some point in the series, she actually has to make a choice and decide who she wants to be, and she chooses a unique path that fits who she is inside, and now she feels very comfortable with herself. This book challenges her notion of who she is. She's able to, spit back in the face of that challenge and go like, bitch, no, I conquer all, and comes out on top, as a hero should in a story like this.
That doesn't really affect the character introductions. There's a way in, early books to introduce a character to make it more natural than what the first book was. And I just want to say that I know at the end of my review for that book, I said that it'd be interesting to see how far she's come as a writer since that first book that I read, and wow, she's gotten so much better. The writing in this book, it flowed better, dialogue seemed more natural.
Yeah, the flow was very good. The flow of the narrative was really, really good. Action-packed. It never slowed down. A lot like, I'm gonna keep harking back to this because I don't read a lot, so it's a lot like Ready Player One. What did I like about Ready Player One? Well, I liked that it had this really plot-driven story that was well written, didn't slow down, didn't get hung up on things, and just kept coming at you. Well, this book had the same kind of thing going on. So, yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it very much. The writing style was very suitable for a book of this length, 360 pages, and it didn't seem to drag at all. It didn't seem very long. If Joe Hill had been writing this book, it probably would have been 800 pages long. I would have gotten tired of hearing the color of everybody's hair described in exquisite detail 10 times over for each character. There's one character's hair that kept getting described, but you know what? Her hair color kept changing, so it kind of made sense. And it was also a reference to something inside of her that was changing as well. And that made sense. And by the way, it still took probably 90% less words to describe her hair than Joe Hill would have taken. Although, honestly, to call back to another one of the few books I've read recently, Nosferatu. This book also had like a concept of a road you could take into this twilight zone that could cross between what essentially amounted to be the same thing as the dream worlds in his book, which is really cool. But in this book, you have to walk the road instead of driving down it in a fancy car, and so it took forever. It literally took days to walk down the road. I'm sure it was very tedious on the zero sleep they had.
You have a better foundation of fantasy than I do. What did you think of the world building in the book?
It was very good. And the reason I think that it seemed to come so easily and it worked so well is because it seems to me to be built on a very solid foundation of Celtic folklore, myth, and legend. One of the books I have read in the last few years is Celtic Myths and Legends by Peter Beresford Ellis. And this thing, if you guys are in any way into myths and legends, if you're in any way into Seanan McGuire's books, if you're in any way into Celtic culture, read this book. What an amazing compendium of Celtic myths and legends from Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, Brittany. If I missed some land that is included there, I'm sorry, but it's a collection of a lot of different myths and legends and includes basically every mythical creature that I just heard mentioned in the book I read is straight out of the pages of this book, straight out of Celtic legends that have spanned Western Europe since over 2,000 years ago. Very interesting use of an old tradition being placed into a modern context, basically bringing the old myths back to life again. So I really did appreciate that, and thank you for that, Seanan McGuire. And I guess a lot of other urban fantasy books do the same kind of thing as well. So that seems like a kind of a cool genre.
My biggest issue with this book is still, I feel like Seanan McGuire has this habit of telling instead of showing. The big advice that people have for authors or writers is show, don't tell. You can have characters do actions instead of having someone incessantly narrate about the actions and why the actions have meaning and the deeper emotional reasonings for everything.
I guess I didn't need to have necessarily the deeper emotional reasonings for why certain actions of October's mother or father made her feel a certain way, with her going back to old memories every time. I guess a more literary approach to writing this book would have had you sit for an hour and guess as to the meaning behind her actions and emotions, but
you don't have to guess. I mean, there's a way to do it without her explicitly saying, and then I was upset because this.
If you just want to skip ahead to the action scene where somebody's head gets smashed in with a baseball bat and it feels so satisfying because they've been built up to be a total bitch, maybe you don't want to get bogged down in all the
there was a way to
hoity-toity.
Hold up. There's a way to do that where we don't want to go into too many spoilers, but someone's head does get bashed in with a baseball bat.
It's glorious.
It's very cathartic to the reader as well, but I feel like when she was doing it, there was too much explanation as to, and then that made me feel better because of all this stuff that's been happening. We have been in her mind for the entire journey. We know why it feels cathartic. She doesn't need to explicitly tell us why it felt good to do that. And I feel like all those little unnecessary moments add up in the book itself, where I do notice it and go, I understood the context, or I understood the implication, or I understood the reasoning without you telling me, and it's unnecessary.
Okay, yeah, that's true. I guess that could get really annoying if you noticed it, but I didn't notice it, so it kind of slipped by me, and it was fine. Clearly, somebody liked this book a little bit better than somebody else, I think.
I enjoyed this book.
I enjoyed this book very much. I thought it was a nice little fantasy escape from the day-to-day. Definitely a step up from the Fear Street series, which we've been reading recently. And by the way, there's a funny little connection to Fear Street here, because we just recently finished reading Fear Street.
Super Chiller Party Summer.
One of the characters' names is Simon, and Simon has several different personalities, two of which look very much alike and are basically twin brothers, but one is like really evil and the other one's like good. And it's really funny, there's a guy named Simon here who has kind of an unsavory character, although in this book he kind of has a little bit of a change of heart for a bit. And then he's got a brother who's actually supposed to be a good guy, but they look almost identical.
Sylvester.
Yeah, Sylvester.
He's October's liege lord.
By the way, if you really hate the whole concept of caste system or people that are an entrenched hierarchy of what's it called, feudalism, if you don't like that kind of thing, then you might enjoy the series, because October is constantly challenging the societal structure that she's living in, and she's like pissing all over all the various lords and ladies. It's a little bit satisfying. You also get a few moments where you really wish she bashed a few more heads, because there's some people that just really, there's like one scene at the end where I was just like, do it! Just kill them all! And she totally could have. She totally could have killed them all. Like, you got that feeling, like, that moment when somebody that is shown to be, like, really powerful and supposed to be feared, all of a sudden has this moment of doubt. And you're like, oh yeah, you know it. You know you're in danger now. It's funny. It's like, she's got this thing going on where the more they break her down, the more dangerous she becomes in other ways that they didn't expect. If you're into like anime or manga, and I can tell you from the perspective of One Piece, one of the cool things about that fandom is if you're into the shonen mangas or animes, where it's a lot about the fight scenes, and it's all about the process of training and learning and acquiring new powers, and how you can do different combos with those powers. It's all about like the different attacks. So the fans of these series will often really get excited over a new chapter that came out where a new attack is used, or they'll, in the comment sections or the forums, they'll be talking about trying to make predictions about what kind of combinations this new power could be used in, and it gets really, really deep, right? So this series is right down into that alley, because you've got like a repertoire of different attacks and weapons you can use, and you can combine them in different ways, and somebody that's kind of into that sort of thing would probably really, really like this series.
Was there anything in this book that particularly stood out to you?
The thing that really kind of interests me about this book, more than anything else, is the deep sort of mythological backstory here, where, what's his name? Is it Oberon or whatever? Has basically shut the gates of all the lower levels of Fairy, and it's clearly building up to, they're gonna find Oberon and make him open up all the gates again. Or at least find out why he was doing it, maybe then agree with him that it should be done. But one way or another, that whole backstory is getting resolved. In fact, there's supposed to be a prophecy where one of, Amandine's children, or she herself could do it also, but somebody in her bloodline has to do it. This is why August, by the way, gets her dumbass lost. August is October's stupid sister, who's been gone for over 100 years. And she thinks she's all that, and she's clearly got her head stuck about 10 feet up her own ass. And she's like, yep, I'm the greatest. I'm gonna go find Oberon and save all of Fairy. And
everyone's like, no, don't do it.
And she's like, herp-a-derp, it was prophesied. And guess what? Yeah, she's totally screwed over. She doesn't know what she's doing.
It's obviously going to be October.
Yeah, it is, because October, by the way, gets way farther than August ever did. Well, actually, she tracks August's footsteps, but she does it with utter ease. She makes it look like, can't believe I have to do all this crap, this easy menial labor just to save my fiance. My mom is such a bitch. Ugh. Whereas, like, it was probably pretty tough for August because she got stuck halfway through it and couldn't make it. And October was just like, whatever. Anyway, I'm getting way too into it. But yeah, it's obviously going to be October. I'm just going to love how much it's going to piss August off because she thinks she's better than everybody. Yeah, guess what? Spoiler alert, you're not. How many glowing pixies out of 5 would you give this book?
On Goodreads, I gave it 3.
Okay.
I thought it was better than the first one. I think I gave the first one 2.75.
Okay.
Which rounds to 3. This one gets a full 3.
I will give it a 4, which makes it better than The Martian by Andy Weir, in my opinion. Sounds pretty weird coming out of my mouth now. I believe I downgraded The Martian in a fit of rage because of some geographical discrepancies that the book had after geeking out about getting everything right about Mars. Wait a second. No, that was the movie. The movie messed all that stuff up. I forget why I soured on the book. Maybe it had some typos. By the way, no typos in this book. Even though we got an advanced reader copy, it was perfectly well edited. No issues whatsoever. I give it 4 glowing pixies out of 5. Easy recommendation. Anybody that is into, be it urban fantasy, be it Celtic myths, be it just plain fantasy whatsoever, you're gonna like it.
You downgraded The Martian because you had read Ready Player One.
Oh, okay. So apparently Ready Player One was just a better flow for me. Was that it?
I guess so.
I think it was the typos. The Martian had like 3 typos and I just like could not handle it. I was really mad about that. Also, there was something else there that pissed me off. I forget now.
Maybe there's some science fact that he got wrong, or engineering.
Could be. Probably not, because he was pretty well researched on that. The movie, I know, totally blew the geography of Mars up in smithereens, and that really rubbed me the wrong way. I forget why. Anyway, Andy Weir, actually, he's coming out with a new book really soon, so maybe I'll give that one a shot.
Yeah, that book's called Artemis. I already read it. It's a good book.
You think I'd like it better than
The Martian? I liked it better than The Martian.
Okay.
I thought it flowed better, but that's a review for another day.
Right. Yeah, let's focus back on October Daye.
The Brightest Fell.
What a great character. Really nice book, and definitely makes me want to read some of the other books in the series. And I'm definitely going to read whatever comes next, because I definitely want to see what happens with this whole Oberon thing.
Yeah, so thanks to the publisher for providing us this book.
And I want everybody to know that our review is in no way biased by the fact that we got the book for free. Alright, well, right after this break,
we're going to talk about Fear Street, Super Chiller, Silent Night.
welcome back to our discussion of Fear Street Super Chiller, Silent Night. Yeah, so this one takes place in the wintertime, and it's super chilly, just like Reva's soul.
Let's get into our prediction accuracy.
I said that the killer dresses up like Santa. There is somebody dressed up like Santa that was suspected of murder. And then we go on to say that there's a stalker that's following the main character, and there is a sneaky person that is kind of following somebody. I also said male murderer, which is correct. Ding, 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 ding. Female victim. And strangulation. Nope.
Yeah, I said it was the first Christmas book, and it was, actually. I said that someone is trying to murder or stalk the main character, and she lives on Fear Street. So there's actually two main characters in this book, and one of the main characters was indeed stalked, and she does live on Fear Street.
True.
But I said it was a female murderer, that she already killed another female, and she did it with a knife. And that is wrong.
Let's get into this.
This book has chapter titles, but unlike the previous chapter titles we had, I felt like they were more vague. So it didn't spoil what was going to happen throughout the chapter. Unlike other books we've seen, it's separated into 2 parts. Part 1 is called Angry Days, and Part 2 is called Silent Nights. It follows 2 interconnected storylines that take place. The book starts with one character, and then partway through one of the chapters, it switches to another character, but it just keeps going between the 2 storylines.
Yeah, and it actually starts out a little bit ahead, and then jumps back 2 weeks, which is a pretty common thing that R.L. Stine has been doing in these books.
So the first storyline follows a girl named Reva and her overall awfulness while working in her father's department store. And the second storyline actually follows her cousin Pam and her 2 guy friends that are hell-bent on revenge against this greatest character ever known as Reva. Mishaps and murder lead to a convergence of the 2 storylines.
Yep, that's a pretty succinct synopsis.
Let's get into the characters.
All right, so first and foremost, we have Reva, who for me is really the defining character of this book.
Yes, Reva Dalby. She has blue eyes and dramatic red hair. You sort of get this description from the description of her 6-year-old brother, who has curly red hair and dark blue eyes with creamy white skin. And she actually says, well, he looks just like I do. What you actually get for Reva is a fully fleshed out personality of bitchiness. The most entitled, selfish, vindictive, calculating, elitist, cold, hung-up, sarcastic, casually cruel bitch you will ever come across.
Yeah, I really can't imagine coming across anybody as just awful as Reva. It's mind-blowing. And to see everything from her point of view and just her thought process as she does all these things is just mind-numbingly awful. And we've had some really, messed up characters.
If any of our listeners watch the show Riverdale, which is the CW/Netflix Archie series, she's actually very similar to Cheryl Blossom, even down to the looks. So that's pretty cool. For those who haven't seen Riverdale yet, check it out. It's like Twin Peaks meets a teen show, and it's really fun to watch.
So we already mentioned that she has a younger brother. She lives with him and her dad, who owns Dalby's department stores. He looks younger than his 45 years, except for the silver that had crept along the sides of his black, closely trimmed hair.
Unfortunately, her mother had passed away 3 years earlier in a plane crash, and that sort of fundamentally changed their family forever.
Right, and I think it's mentioned that she actually became a little bit more cold and cruel after her mom passed away.
But she still treats her brother Michael really well because she realizes that, he's only 6 years old and it must be really tough for him to grow up without a mother. He has a nanny named Yvonne, but it's not the same thing. So she really feels for him. She plays Chutes and Ladders for hours with him. She takes him to go see Santa Claus, and she really just tries to be the best sister she can for him. And I guess that makes up, in her mind, how she treats everyone else in the world.
Yeah, she's an okay sister. She's not super the best, but she's also not unnecessarily cruel or mean to him, which I guess in her book counts as being amazing. She is a senior in high school. She can't wait to get out of Shadyside High, and she's already been accepted to Smith,
which is located in Northampton, Massachusetts, which is actually nearby where our last Super Chiller took place. It's an all-women's college. It's one of the Seven Sisters, if you know what they are. She has no friends.
That's right. She has no friends. She does have a boyfriend, who we'll get into later.
She treats him like crap and dumps him in the first chapter, in the cruelest way possible. And she gets so many shits and giggles from it. It's unbelievable.
She has a Doberman guard dog trained to attack with a whistle. She is spending the holidays working at her dad's store because it's the busiest season and he needs the help. She actually isn't doing any work. She ignores all the customers, treats her supervisor like crap. It's not a pretty picture.
Yeah, there's actually, I think he has several branches of this department store. I think he has 4. He has stores located in Cleveland, in Pittsburgh, and in Walnut Creek, in addition to the one in Shadyside.
Right, which is weird because he somehow wasn't able to break into the Center City market. But at the same time, he's got stores in major cities like Cleveland and Pittsburgh, by the way, all in the Ohio area. Weirdly enough, in Shadyside, which is supposed to be a pretty small town, yet somehow big enough for a mall and this big old department store.
To be fair, Walnut Creek is in California.
Is that really the only Walnut Creek? I think Walnut Creek maybe is supposed to be just a made-up place. I'll just say that it's a made-up place.
Well, there's a Walnut Creek in Ohio.
Aha! The only thing here that I gotta say is they talk about vacationing on Cape Cod, but maybe this is just a Shadyside thing, like the upper crust of Shadyside really has deep roots back in Massachusetts for some reason. It's possible.
Well, I mean, she is going to Smith, which is in Massachusetts as well, so hard to tell.
Her cousin Pam Dalby is a pretty different person, I would say.
Well, you get her description from Reva, who we've established is a pretty terrible human being. She's poorer than Reva's family. So, to be fair, Reva sounds like she's loaded. It's hard to say, but she's described as poor, living in a ramshackle old house on Fear Street. Reva is very jealous of Pam's looks and her popularity. So she has straight blonde hair, usually pulled back in a ponytail, with a round, friendly face and flashing green eyes. And Reva says that she just has this clean-cut, all-American good look about her, and it just pisses Reva off to no end. And to go back to the Riverdale comparison, she looks like Betty Cooper.
Her clean-cut all-American is what Reva's so jealous about. Reva is basically being shitty, evil, and jealous about how her cousin is not shitty or evil. I can't believe she's so popular because she doesn't treat people like crap.
Well, during the description thing, even though she's calling her cousin pretty, the entire time during the descriptions, she's saying, I don't know why she doesn't do something else with her hair. I don't know why she doesn't put on a little makeup. A little lipstick goes a long way. Like little snide comments the entire time.
I don't know why she wears the same pair of jeans to school every day. Oh wait, it's because she's too poor to afford anything else.
Yeah, it sucks to be her for being so poor.
Oh
it's
my god. Look, there's just the most awful stuff she says. It's terrible.
So Pam actually calls Reva up for a job at Dalby's department store. So this is after we see Reva giving jobs to people left and right. And her dad had already told her, listen, I'm going to need more help during this winter season. If you can get people in the store for me, that'd be really, really great. So Pam calls. Reva wants like nothing to do with her poor cousin. Doesn't want her poor cousin in the store ruining her holiday selling.
Yeah, this scene is so bad because actually Reva is literally in her room. She just got off the phone offering somebody else a job, and she's sitting around trying to think of who else to call. And Pam basically reads her mind and calls her about the job. And she starts out with the usual pleasantries. How's Uncle Robert? Pam asked. Daddy's fine, Reva told her. Kinda tired, you know. It's showtime at the store. That's what I wanted to ask you about, Pam said. I was wondering, Reva. She hesitated. This was obviously difficult for Pam. Are there any jobs available at the store? You know, for the holidays? No way, Reva thought, tapping her purple fingernails against the phone receiver. Who needs a poor, tacky cousin lurking about, making me feel guilty? Oh, I'm so sorry, Reva told Pam, making herself sound really upset. I wish you'd called me last week, Pam. All the holiday jobs are taken. I'm such a good liar, Reva congratulated herself. I sound so broken up, even I would believe me. Oh, Pam replied quietly, obviously very disappointed. I wish I'd called sooner. This is, like, ridiculous. And then Reva goes on to just, like, gloat about how bad she's making Pam feel. What a shame, Reva said, sighing sympathetically. I feel terrible, Pam. Then she brightened her tone. Oh, well, good to hear from you. We'll have to get together before Christmas. Say hi to your parents. Reva replaced the receiver, a pleased smile on her face. All in all, it had been quite a satisfying evening. That's a little window into Reva's world there for you guys.
Well, later, there's another phone call between Reva and Pam. Reva talks about how, you're so lucky you don't have a job. I'm so tired from working and making money. It must be great to be you.
Right. It's funny because at this point, Pam's already figured out that everybody and their, like, second cousin already got a job at the store, thanks to Reva, but somehow this is all during and after she had asked. And she's really pissed off because it really rubs her.
So R.L. Stine wants to hammer home the point that Pam's side of the family isn't well off because they own a third-hand Pontiac Grand Prix.
Yeah, and this thing's a piece of crap. It really has trouble starting. It's one of those cars, you know, you really have to turn the ignition a few times before it starts. I mean, especially in the winter, this is pretty common, but geez.
She has a boyfriend named Foxy, which is funny because in Party Summer, Jan's dog was named Foxy. So
good catch.
So Foxy seems to be a decent guy. He's always willing to listen to her problems. She calls him a real teddy bear, and he also has a job at Dalby's.
Yeah, everybody, like I said, and their second cousin has the job.
The next major character we come across is Hank Davis, who is the poor guy that Reva dumps unceremoniously after 6 months of dating him, and it's in the first chapter.
Yeah, I don't know about unceremoniously, because she, like, specifically drives to an abandoned part of town in the rain, pulls over on a random street corner, and makes him get out of the car. She literally makes it the worst possible breakup for him.
Yeah, he thinks that she just wants to make out with him, so he's like really excited that they're in this dark part of Shadyside, and it turns out, yeah, it's the worst breakup ever.
It turns out he's walking home.
He's described as having blonde, short, spiky hair, large, dark, serious eyes with a diamond stud in one ear. He has a thick football player's neck, big, broad-chested with powerful arms. And he's also described as having an awful temper. He punched a hole through a screen door once because Reva didn't feel like watching the latest Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, which seems like an over-the-top reaction.
Yeah, maybe they're made for each other. I don't know.
At one point after they break up, Hank wants a job. So tail between the legs, goes to her house and says, listen, just forget whatever happened between us. Can I get a job?
So basically, he comes in and he says, I heard you were giving out jobs. I wondered if there were any left, Hank said, blushing. You know, at your father's store. Reva laughed cruelly. For you? I could really use a job, Reva. This was hard for me to come here tonight, you know? Okay, so you don't want to go out with me anymore? Alright, but if there are jobs available, I thought... His voice trailed off. Reva's cold glare wasn't making it any easier for him. I don't think so, Hank, she said quietly. He stared at her, not believing her casual cruelty. I don't think so, she repeated, not bothering to hide her amusement. With an angry cry, he grabbed her arm. What is the problem? He screamed. Let go of me, Reva ordered, but he gripped her arm even tighter. Seething with anger, he glared at her. Why are you doing this to me? Let go, she cried, more angry than frightened. And then suddenly she put her teeth together and whistled, a piercing, high-pitched, steady tone. Hank's eyes opened wide in surprise, in confusion, and he dropped her arm. A second later, the shrubs beside the house began to rustle. Then they both heard a low growl, a frightening sound that rapidly became louder, closer, and roaring out of the darkness came King, the Dalby's guard dog, their well-trained Doberman, obeying his attack signal, Reva's whistle. And this is like, this whole scene plays out where basically the dog, like, nearly murders this kid. And Reva's getting off on it this entire time. She's just like, this is great. Really, really awful person that she is.
Well, he eventually goes to the store himself and gets a job there. As an assistant in security, he watches the security monitors.
Right, which goes back to Pam. Why didn't she just pull herself up by her own bootstraps and get a job at the store instead of just begging Reva for a handout, right?
Why wouldn't she ask Uncle Robert for a job?
Robert would probably give it to her.
Good on Hank, but he is kind of an angry, violent person. Next up, we have the first person Reva offers a job, Mitch Castellona. He has a thick mop of black hair, adorable dimples. He's a good tennis player and he's really cute, but he has a hoarse, croaky voice that doesn't quite mesh up with how he looks. And the reason Reva hired him was because she wanted to flirt with him and steal him away from his girlfriend, Lisa.
Who's a total drip, by the way, according to Reva. Whatever the heck that even means.
But her plan does work because they do end up making out. Lisa witnesses it and obviously dumps his ass. When he comes crawling to Reva...
So he's like, oh, Lisa broke up with me, so I guess we better, like, start dating now.
She just turns him down and talks about how pathetic he is. And then he does the whole, how can you do this to people? Which Hank basically did in the scene you just read.
He is pretty pathetic, though. There's no sympathy for this character.
Yeah, his girlfriend and then ex-girlfriend Lisa Dewey is a bleached blonde with a little girl face and a little girl voice, according to Reva.
Yeah, so I want to say this is more like Lissa, right? Because it's got two S's, and we're trying to distinguish from Lisa, who we all know and love.
So I guess Lissa then. So when Reva calls Mitch to offer him a job, he's actually hanging out with Lissa. And obviously he got a job and she wanted a job too. So Reva's like, you know what? This would make the game a lot more fun if Lissa was there to witness me stealing Mitch away from her, because that's a normal thought process.
Yeah, and her plan works too.
She actually offers Lissa a job as working in the basement stockroom. But what she tells Lissa is she's going to be selling Chanel at the perfume counter, so she needs to wear her best clothing to work when she shows up. So obviously Lissa shows up dressed to the nines, and everyone stares at her and goes, "You're supposed to be in the basement? Why are you dressed up like that? Go home and change."
Yeah, so she shows up to work and gets sent home right away to change. It's pretty awful.
And Reva's just cackling to herself.
Yeah, everybody sees Reva just standing there cackling. The supervisor in charge of that department knows exactly what happened, does nothing because she's the boss's daughter, and there's nothing he can really do.
The next person that gets offered a job from her is Rob Spring. He has curly brown hair with brown eyes, which always seems to be laughing. He's nice, funny, and a lot of fun, and he's kind of overweight, or as Reva calls it, he's a buffalo. Really nice girl. He's involved with a jazz quartet that he formed, and he's supposedly a talented pianist, but she's not good enough friends with him to care to ever hear him play.
Basically, she says she would actually like him if he wasn't so fat.
So when Reva hires him, she tells him that he's going to get a public relations job. He should probably come in with a suit and tie, but actually, he's supposed to be Santa Claus. And her thought process is, he doesn't even need padding as Santa because he's so fat. And she tells him that to his face when he gets to work.
In front of everybody else that just showed up as well. That's what she does.
Another character you meet pretty early on is security guard Wakely, or when we meet him, he's an ex-security guard. He gets fired before Christmas after working the store for 25 years. He's bald with dark eyes, and he got fired because he drinks on the job. And when you see him subsequently, he is constantly drinking.
I do have to say in his defense, though, his son says he's never seen him like that before. So I don't think the drinking was really as big of a problem before he got fired.
Well, he went from a functional alcoholic to a not functional alcoholic is what I'm seeing.
Could be.
He lives in a tiny house in the old village with his son, Mickey Wakely, who is also Pam Dalby's friend.
Mickey is short and very thin. Perhaps malnourished would be another description of him. He has inch-long blonde hair and blue eyes, and is goofy looking. His face is full of freckles, big jug ears that stuck out a mile on either side, a bad complexion, always eating chocolate. Perhaps the two are related. Always managed to appear awkward and uncomfortable. This guy's basically friends with Pam since childhood. He used to be funny and goofy and fun to be around, but recently he's more quiet and sullen and didn't joke as much. This could be due to his dad's slow descent into ruin through alcoholism. He's pretty poor. His house is often described as tiny. His living room that Pam, him, and their friend Clay Parker hang out in is often described as a box. This kid's a pretty sad character. He kind of tries to fit in with his friend Clay, and I feel like he'll do anything just to fit in with that guy, and that guy is bad news, and so he's kind of going down the wrong path.
If you remember Paul from Haunted, the ghost guy, he actually lived in the old village too, so do you remember the descriptions that R.L. Stine was writing about that entire part of town?
Right.
And that really gives you an idea of Mickey's home life. So Mickey and Pam have a friend, Clay Parker. They're like the three musketeers in this book. He's very thin, tall, and lanky. He has brown hair slicked straight back and has a mysterious scar over his right eyebrow and steel gray eyes that are very restless. When he walks, he has stooped shoulders with a very hard expression on his face, and he always seems nervous, jittery. There's enough raw energy to make him explode. And he, along with Hank Davis, has a horrible temper issue where he's constantly getting angry. He always has a weapon on him. And when you first meet him at 7-Eleven, he assaults a cashier who accuses the three of them of shoplifting. And then the police come. He ends up jumping in Pam's car and he gets on this high-speed chase to get away from the cops.
Oh, this scene was so intense. This is right in the first few pages of the book, and I had to put the book down because I was just so worried about Pam getting caught up in this ridiculous caper. Actually, it was like assault and armed robbery or whatever, but whatever. It was pretty intense, and I was very concerned for Pam, and so I kind of put the book down. I had to walk away for about a day.
Well, Clay had grander schemes for all of them because he set up a plan with a security guard at Dalby's named John Maywood to rob the entire department store. during the Christmas season.
Right, this is what happens, kids. You start off by robbing salsa dip from 7-Eleven. Next thing you know, knocking up a department store through a weird plan where like a security guard ends up dead. Let's move into the in-depth plot. Sounds like things are getting pretty heavy.
Yeah, so their plan is that Clay and Mickey will rob the store while Pam is the getaway driver. But she realizes that it is dark and creepy to sit outside by herself, so she's gonna go inside and just watch them steal shit and run away with them. The security guard they're supposed to meet isn't there, and they're like, whatever, maybe he's robbing another part of the store, but we're gonna hit the VCRs first. And
yeah, well, they were supposed to meet him in the electronics section, and it kind of makes sense to rob the electronics section because you can get a bunch of valuable shit there.
But while they're there, they run into another security guard who is not part of this plan, and he decides that he's gonna take these kids in.
You mean he's just doing his job?
Correct. But Clay has a gun, the security guard has a gun, they're pointing at each other, there's a gunshot, the security guard falls, blood is everywhere,
and the kids run away.
Get the hell out of there.
Yep, they peace out.
But Clay then tells his friends that he had an unloaded gun, and there's no way it's his fault that the guy died.
Well, actually, before the guard goes down, he manages to trigger the security alarm, so there's actually cops on the way. They hear the sirens as they're rushing back to their car. This is a really intense scene. If you go back to it, in the earlier scene where they robbed the 7-Eleven is really intense. Once they get in their car and they jump in, the cops actually start chasing them. Clay's driving Pam's car. It almost doesn't start a few times. He gets it going. It's this old clunker. The cops are right on their tail. Mikey is really surprised that he managed to get it up to 95, but they're like on small streets going 95. Crazy, crazy stuff as a truck pulls right in front of them. Clay manages to swerve onto the sidewalk, avoids the truck, and then makes a hard right turn. The cop car has to stop to like not hit the truck, and so they manage to get away. And then they're like, oh crap, probably the license plate will get traced. And Pam's like, ha, psych, there's no license plate on the back of the car because it fell off due to rust damage, and my dad never got around to putting it back on. It's really funny. On their way to rob the department store, the cops actually see them and tail them for a little bit, probably because the car looks mad similar to the one they were chasing the other day, but then they just let him go. They get to the department store, and I think they very nearly get caught escaping as they're driving away from the department store after the alarm gets triggered and that security guard dies. They actually see two police cruisers like freaking fly by right in front of them, but they don't stop for them. They're responding to the emergency. Of course, too late to save the poor security guard who's just doing his job. Clay claims he wasn't the one that pulled the trigger.
It's all over the radio about how $25,000 was stolen from the downstairs safe. The security guard died.
Pam is like, well, I was there the whole time and there wasn't any safe. What are they talking about?
You find out later in a conversation between Mr. Dalby and Reva that the guard was shot in the back. And Mr. Dalby finds that to be really strange because why would he be shot in the back? He's not the type of guy to run away from burglars, so he can't figure out why the trajectory was how it was. Clay, Mickey, and Pam get these phone calls and someone is blackmailing them saying, I know what you guys did. I want $10,000. I know who you are. And they're freaking out.
Yeah, and they don't have $10,000 obviously because they didn't actually rob the place.
Pam is eventually assaulted by the blackmailer 2 blocks from her house. She sees the guy's face and is rescued by Foxy, her boyfriend.
Right, and then you have kind of a little bit of a cliffhanger there because it jumps to Reva's storyline again and you don't find out who the stalker guy is.
So going into Reva's storyline, her storyline basically involves her being the biggest bitch in the world and she's getting her comeuppance. Anyway, she keeps getting packages signed Happy Holidays from a friend. So the first thing that happens to her is when she is busy not helping customers or doing any work, she's putting on lipstick. And as she puts on lipstick, her entire lip gets cut up because someone shoved a needle in her lipstick. Later, she's given a bottle of perfume and then she decides that it's blood or some shit like that and she drops it and it splashes all over her white cashmere sweater. Then someone sends her a box and she opens it and it's like this creepy looking mannequin with a creepy looking face. Mannequins are creepy already. If you haven't seen the episode of Doctor Who, you should take a look. And then she gets a box with Mitch's dead body.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. It escalated pretty quickly there, didn't it?
But she decides that it's Hank who's sending her all this crap, and he's the culprit. And there's this great scene where she's telling him that he must be the one that sent her all this stuff. You're not a good liar, Hank. Reva said, glaring angrily at him. You put a needle in my lipstick? You've been trying to frighten me, trying to terrorize me to pay me back for the way I broke up with you. But no way, he said softly. He took a step toward the closed office door. No way. You're denying it? Her eyes burned into his. No way, he repeated. Hank, I know you hate me, Reva blurted. She surprised herself. That wasn't in her prepared speech. It appeared to surprise Hank, too. His expression changed, softened. His dark eyes narrowed. Hey, I don't hate you, he said. I feel sorry for you. His words stung like a slap in the face. She uttered a low cry. You feel sorry? For me? She felt like laughing and crying at the same time. I don't understand, she managed to say, confused by her strong feelings. Anyone could have sent you those things, Hank explained. You don't have a friend in the world, Reva. Everyone hates you. Everyone. I can think of 10 people who hate you enough to put a needle in your lipstick. You're crazy, she screamed. You're really sick. I'm not saying it to be cruel, he replied heatedly, his normally pale face flushed, his dark eyes excited. I'm explaining why I feel sorry for you. But it's not true, Reva started. Tell me one good friend you've got, Hank demanded, moving toward her, looming over her, powerful in his blue uniform. Come on, name one. Well, why couldn't she think of anyone? How stupid, she thought. Of course I have friends. I have lots of friends. Name one, Reva challenged herself. Name one. I feel sorry for you, Hank repeated, not backing off, not letting her off the hook. You don't have a friend in the world.
That's true. There are a lot of people in this book who would probably think it's quite funny to stick a needle in her lipstick and would get a kick out of watching her cut her lips. She's not a nice person. I don't know how else to put it.
So there is a big reveal in this book. You find out that Pam's boyfriend, Foxy, is Rob.
Yeah, I was very surprised by that. I was like, what? How did that happen? Did not see it coming. And what happens, we just mentioned earlier that Mitch's dead body shows up in a box. Kind of like the mannequin box, but instead of a mannequin, it's an actual dead boy in there. And Rob is accused of killing Mitch because two of them had a fight earlier that morning before work started. And Reva figures out that when she brought her brother to see Santa that same day, it wasn't actually Rob doing the Santa job because her brother said that Santa was wearing some padding on his tummy. And she's like, well, Rob doesn't need any padding on his tummy.
So she confirms this with her dad by going to the security office and looking at the footage and zooming in on Santa when her brother's there and finding out it's not Rob. They scar the childhoods of many children by having Santa arrested instead of calling him to the back and taking him away there.
Yeah, right? They could just page him over the intercom.
During a quick cousin bonding session, Pam tells Reva that Rob was actually with her during the time of Mitch's death, and that Rob was the one that sent her a bunch of creepy crap, but he didn't do anything criminal, like murder.
Exactly, he just put needles in lipstick and shit like that.
They're about to drive...
regular kid stuff.
Isn't it regular kid stuff?
Oh yeah, dead cats in lockers, chicken heads, shaving cream in sneakers.
Par for the course.
Yep.
The two cousins are about to drive home from the department store when Reva realizes that she left her bag in her dad's office? Or the security office? One of the two places. So she goes in after hours and she runs into drunk Mr. Wakely.
And this is the big final showdown of the entire book. This is where we find out that Mr. Wakely is actually the one that's behind the murders. He's actually very upset that he got fired right before Christmas. So in order to get back at Reva's dad, he's going to steal all the money. He's going to steal it all. But he's a drunk and his plan sucks.
Well, his plan was with Mr. Maywood, John Maywood. Their plan was that Maywood would set up 3 kids and have them distract the security guard in charge at the time, while the 2 of them rob the safe. But Mr. Wakely, as he's leaving, sees that, hey, his son is one of the kids that was gonna get set up, and he can't have that. He shoots the security guard in the back. He realizes that Mitch is blackmailing his kid, and he can't have that either, so he murders Mitch.
The thing is, Mitch was also a witness to the whole thing, so there's a couple of reasons to be getting rid of him.
As they do in horror books, after the whole confession, he needs to kill Reva.
This is like the knife, right? Where the hospital administrator is like, well, shit, I told you too much, now you must die. And much like the knife, he suffers a similar fate.
He tries to kill her, and he does shoot at her, but then once he has her cornered, instead of, shooting at her, he jumps. She's cornered on a balcony. When he leaps, he leaps over her down into the Christmas tree and gets electrocuted.
Yeah, so this is a pretty large department store. It's got more than 2 floors, I'm assuming here. If it's just your standard run-in-the-mill department store that's got like 2 floors and you fall into the Christmas tree, you're probably not going to die. But this guy probably falls like 4 or 5 floors, I don't know. But he like really buys it. He just basically gets impaled on the tree. It's pretty nuts.
The book ends at the police station with Pam confessing to the cops everything that's happening. Rob, Hank, and Reva are waiting for her to finish her testimony. She's released on bail to her parents. Mickey has to live with his aunt and uncle because his dad is now dead. And Clay is going to be testifying in a few days. And there's a happily ever after with Reva and Hank. Don't you want to go back to your crazy ex-girlfriend?
Yeah, I know. He was free of her for a while, and then suddenly he just decides, you know what? Yeah, I really want to get back with her.
I mean, she did send her Doberman to attack me, but let bygones be bygones.
I just don't get it. I just don't think she should get off the hook for what an awful human being she is, just because she's dealing with her mom's death. And that seems to be the way this book is wrapped up at the end, is where it's kind of framed in such a way that she seems to realize that she's been awful to everybody. She blames it on the sadness and the loss that she feels, and then it's kind of like excused away. And I don't think that's an excuse. I think she's just an awful human being, and there's no excusing it, no matter what happened to her.
I feel so warm, Reva thought. So light, as if a layer of ice had melted away from me. If I hadn't been so cold, so bottled up, so hateful, maybe none of this would have happened. What a shame that such horrors had to take place before I could feel again, Reva thought. Now she felt sadness and relief that it was all over. I have real feelings now, she realized. Warm feelings. Sad feelings.
So what happened actually is that 2 people died because she was a bitch. Because if she had given Pam that job that Pam asked for, then none of those events would have happened that led to that security guard getting killed. And then Mitch would also not have been killed as well. 2 people died needlessly due to these like stupid machinations of this girl. Let that be a warning to everybody. Try not to go out of your way to be mean to people. It's generally a bad idea, and it's going to have repercussions that you're not even going to foresee. It's called passing it on. So, it turns out that passing it on has a flip side where you can pass on the darkness too. And so basically what Reva's doing is the anti-passing it on, where she's passing on all this negativity and bad vibes that just floats out in all directions around her like ripples in a pond and cause mayhem and destruction. It's pretty bad. And you get to see that. And then at the end of the book, it's like, oh, well, you know what? I've seen the wrongs of my way. No, you don't get off the hook that easily. There is a lot of atonement that needs to happen for the kind of stuff you did, and I don't see any atonement happening.
Spoiler alert, there's a Silent Night too, and I think Reva's still a bitch in that.
I bet she is, because I don't see anything happening at the end of this book that would make me think she's actually going to change for the better. I will be surprised if it turns out that she's somehow, reformed.
Do you have any nitpicks? Because I had a nitpick about, so there's these constant power surges, electrical surges in Dalby's department store where things keep shorting out, the lights keep going out. There's one scene where a bunch of lights sort of all go out and it sounds like a machine gun. This is when Reva has spilled all that blood on her white cashmere sweater and her dad runs out of her office, hears the machine gun type things, takes one look at Reva and passes out because he thinks his daughter was murdered. But did they ever explain the electrical surges?
No, they don't. And I'm really happy that they didn't explain them, because getting into the Fear Street mythos, I was really hoping, as soon as I heard about the surges, that it would be one of those things that remains unexplained, and then we could try to tie it in with the mythos, because they do sound very mysterious. At the end of the book, read through the whole thing, and guess what? They keep getting mentioned, and they're never explained. They're pretty integral to the whole plot. Anna already mentioned the blood on the sweater being linked to, it almost sounded like a shooting at the store, right? Well, Mikey's dad is actually fired in part because all of these surges are happening during the holiday season and nobody has a good explanation for why it's happening. It could be a potential security threat, and as head of security, he has been unable to track down the cause of the problem. Could this be related to the overarching scheme by that unnamed corporation? It definitely could tie in somehow. Maybe it has to do with the corporation. They're going to need some kind of power source, obviously, to power whatever the heck they're doing, right? Maybe the electrical grid isn't providing enough power to run whatever the heck they're doing, and it's causing surges, instability in the power delivery systems. It's affecting the store. Maybe the store is located close to base of operations for mineral extraction that is going to happen eventually. Maybe it's close to that secret wing of the hospital that's going to get built. We don't know exactly what's causing the power surges, but it could be related.
Well, the knife is the next book in the series. That could be related.
I guess the really mysterious thing about this is that this very wealthy man who is personally overseeing the flagship store of his operation can't seem to hire a competent electrician to figure out what's causing the power surges. It can't be that hard to figure out. Hire a man or a woman that know what they're doing and can find the source of the problem. Odd, isn't it?
Well, I think it's odd is that he needs his 17-year-old daughter to find seasonal employees for his flagship store.
It does strike me as odd that that's happening. Anyways, maybe there's something going on behind the scenes. He seems very insistent. In the scene where he fires Mickey's dad, it seems like there was some angry words exchanged. He says, I think we both said some stuff we shouldn't have, but I just had to fire him. I think there's something else going on, and the head of security may have been in on something that we just don't know about. It's one of those things that's kind of left in the background. There may have been some shady dealings going on. Who knows what?
Reva did say that she gets really creepy, strange feelings when she walks through part of the department store at night when there's no one there. So that could have something to do with it.
What was that one show we watched?
Doctor Who?
No, the Archie show. It turns out that what everybody thought was a reputable business was actually dealing heroin, right?
Spoilers.
Right, so it could be a similar thing going on here, where it turns out that this guy that seems to be really bad at running a business actually is not running the business you think he is.
Do stores normally keep $25,000 in a safe?
I don't know. This store sure does. And that's the small safe downstairs. The really big one has more money.
So my thoughts are maybe he is doing drug smuggling and that's why there's so much cash in the store.
Who knows what's really going on here?
There's another thing in the mythos where Reva notes that all the cops look so young, they almost look her age.
Right. This is going back again to Missing, where that cult was busted up and we're assuming a lot of the police were in there.
Yeah, and the cops have really fast response times in this book.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? I was talking about earlier in another conspiracy theory that the fast response time of the fire department to the school could have something to do with the school's link to the overarching plan, where perhaps the students are actually being experimented upon. Maybe the staff and teachers are in on it. The corporation needs to keep careful watch over the school, which is, a really big investment for them. So obviously the fire department would need to have a quick response time. If the corporation owns the whole town, they would also control the fire department. And they need to protect their investment in the school, which is a big central part of their experiment. Jumping back to this story, now we have a quick response to the store being specifically guarded, or maybe it's close to another location that is, and that's why we have the fast response time, and maybe it's sort of tied to the power surges.
Well, why are we assuming that Robert Dalby is part of some drug smuggling? Maybe he's doing something for the corporation, and that's why there's such fast response time, because they need to protect what's in the store as well. And that's why he has a small safe with $25,000.
Right, well, that's the part that doesn't make any sense, right? Because if he was tied to the corporation, then they would have resolved the power surge issue already. The other thing that...
Well, no, because it's being caused by the corporation. It's like in Stranger Things, there's always power surges when...
I was just about to mention that. Yeah, exactly. This is reminiscent of Stranger Things, where the experiment to open that interdimensional portal is actually causing the power surges throughout the town. In this case, it seems to be localized to this store, however.
The basement of Dalby's is being used by the corporation to do some experiments, and that's why they're getting a ton of money from the corporation. That's why you have all those power surges, and that's why there's such a fast response time.
Maybe they had to get rid of the security guard because he's getting a little too close to the truth. I like this whole power surge idea kind of being like a Stranger Things idea of maybe there's a disturbance in the electromagnetic field that is being caused by something. Now, we already know actually that one of the possible properties of the mysterious clay mineral is
time distortion.
Exactly, which is almost like opening up portals to travel between different times. This is exactly kind of thing that sounds very similar to what happened in Stranger Things, where a portal does get opened up. Now, it's not a time travel portal, but it is interdimensional travel, and it does cause a lot of electrical surges. So, yeah, it could be something going on here.
90s things.
Yeah, hey, so the thing that really struck me in terms of 90s things was when the kids are going in, they think they're going to rob the store, they go straight for the VCRs. Okay, this is so 90s, right? While VCRs could be purchased in stores in the 2000s, this wouldn't really be the first thing you'd go for. You'd probably go for maybe a DVD player. But 90s, definitely the VCRs are an electronics item that is a must-have in the house.
Another 90s thing is there's a scene where every single TV in the electronics department is displaying Oprah. That could be an aughts thing too, I guess.
Yeah, it could be.
Did you have any thoughts when you were reading the book?
Mostly, I was just thinking about what an awful person Reva was. Oh my god. It's like that girl from Lights Out, but probably like about 3 times as bad. And because you see her own inner thought process, you actually get to see her awful actions and then her gleeful reaction to her own actions and just see how much she gets off on treating people like crap. Wow. The other thing is me thinking about R.L. Stine finally branching out and writing this amazing anti-hero, which it just shows that he sometimes breaks out of the formula and tries something new. He does like to try different kinds of stories.
Well, I was thinking that same thing because we had a private conversation recently about how a lot of R.L. Stine's protagonists could be interchangeable because their personalities aren't necessarily that much different from each other. Well, Reva is really the first character that really stands out as being significantly different than any other protagonist that he's ever had.
Yeah, she really breaks the mold, so to speak. And you have Pam, on the other hand, who's a very natural Fear Street protagonist, all-American, clean-cut, whatever. Pretty similar to a lot of the protagonists we've had in the past. But Reva, on the other hand, it's almost like R.L. Stine wrote her character in protest. He's starting to get a little bit sick of his own stereotypical Fear Street protagonist and decided to write something completely different as a stab against the status quo there. I don't know, it's kind of interesting.
Did you twig in any of the things that were going to happen?
Did I twig the things? What does that mean?
Did you see anything coming?
Oh, no, I saw nothing coming. And I am very, very impressed that you actually figured out the Foxy thing.
For some reason, I thought that in the book that it stated that Foxy and Rob were the same person. So when I got to the big reveal where Reva's really confused and it's obviously a big reveal for readers, I was like, didn't we already know this at the very beginning? And what really struck me was that because Pam had mentioned to Mickey and Clay that Foxy just got a job at Dalby's, and Reva had just given Rob a job, and I was like, oh. And then I thought somewhere it said that Foxy was Rob, or that she said Rob at one point. You know, that kind of ruined a lot for me, because there's a scene where Mitch and Rob get in this big fight. Rob obviously knows that Mitch has been blackmailing his girlfriend. Reva's like, I don't know what's happening, and I guess the reader's supposed to be in the dark, but because Pam had seen Mitch's face when he attacked her that night and told Rob, I was like, oh, well, obviously, you know, that's why they're fighting. Wow, R.L. Stine wrote a really obvious scene. And when Mitch showed up dead, I was like, okay, well, maybe Rob has something to do with it because he wants to protect his girlfriend or something.
Right, and then Reva figures everything out, and you're just like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah. I was really confused. But then when I read the book for a second time when I was making our outline, I was like, oh, it never actually showed up. I, for some reason, saw Mr. Wakely's thing coming as well. I guess that was pretty obvious, though.
Not to me.
I thought what was happening with Mr. Wakely's storyline was that he actually overheard what was going on. So I didn't know that he had something with Maywood, but like my whole theory while reading was that he heard the plan going on with the kids and he decided that he wanted in on it. And then when the gun was drawn on his kids, that's why he pulled the trigger. And then I figured he was listening in on the whole conversation about Mitch, and then that's why he stabbed Mitch.
Yeah, so I figured he definitely didn't listen in on that conversation. That was a really kind of a sad scene where we actually mentioned this earlier in our review before the break. Show, don't tell. Here we have a great example of the craft. R.L. Stine showing what Mr. Wakely has come to as he works his way through 2 six-packs in the kitchen, right next to the box-like living room where the kids are hanging out, and you just hear him opening up one can after another, popping the tab, sitting in the kitchen chair by the table, drinking down a six-pack. At one point he gets up, he opens the fridge, and he gets the other six-pack, and once again just works his way through it. Pop the tab, drink, sit at the kitchen table, drink the beer. It's really depressing. The guy's literally just working his way through that stuff. I really don't think he was in the state of mind to be overhearing anything going on over in the room next door.
How do you compare this to the previous Super Chiller that we read?
Well, the previous one clearly had a lot more to contribute in terms of the Fear Street mythos. You finally find out about the Fear family and the entire beginning of the legend, so to speak. This book is more standalone. The Fear Street mythos is very tangential to the whole plot, and you really have to dig deep to look for it.
But R.L. Stine did leave the crumbs that we followed to the shady side version of Hawkins' lab.
We are onto you, R.L. Stine, and we see the grand overarching plot line that you are crafting here.
I do think there was some padding in this book, just like in Party Summer. There's a scene where Reva is driving home. There's a car tailing her. She's freaking out. She gets home. She's running to her front door. The car pulls up behind her. The guy's running behind her. And it just turns out that he accidentally hit her car in the parking lot, broke her tail light, and he just wants to exchange insurance information. But the scene is built up. I just felt like it was padding that was unnecessary.
It's a complete throwaway portion. And we saw the same thing in the previous Super Chiller. So, yeah, he does struggle a little bit with the page count here.
He did a better job of it, I feel, with this book. I feel like the 216 pages did its job. It was a good amount. Aside from that one scene, I don't think there were many other things that stood out as unnecessary. He actually did a good job with the characters. It was a lot of show don't tell with the characters. You really got to see Clay's hair trigger temper. You got to see how Hank could get angrier and angrier. You saw Reva's overall bitchiness without her explaining like that she just wants to be a cold-hearted bitch. You got to see Mickey's dad just fall apart after losing his job. It was really well done.
And the abject poverty that Mickey lives in.
Yeah.
So that show don't tell falls apart at the end, though. For me, the weakest part of the book was, again, when miraculously Reva has this change of heart, has this whole internal monologue where she comes to realize that, oh, I guess it was because my mom died that I became such an uber bitch. I'm really a good person at heart. Derpa derpa derp. Okay.
I feel like that's one of those weird enlightened things that we all get. It's like how, have you ever procrastinated for schoolwork?
Yes.
And done things the last minute? And as you're finishing up at 6 a.m. right before you have to go to school, you've spent all night writing this paper, you always think to yourself, next assignment, I'm going to start as soon as the teacher assigns it, and everything's going to be fine. And then lo and behold, the next assignment comes, and you're doing it the night before. I feel like this is the emotional equivalent of that. I'm not going to be as bitchy anymore. I can be a good person. I know I've learned from it. And then within 2 days, she's going to fall back to uber bitch mode.
Mm-hmm. That's right, because the way I think the human mind works is that you have something called force of habit. And so when you exercise the same neural pathways over and over again, so what she's doing, she's exercising the pathways of evil and and avarice and hate. She's got this whole reward feedback cycle already in her brain. You can see the dopamine release every time she shits on somebody. That habit's going to be really hard to break. You're not going to suddenly become a good person because you realize you became evil because your mom died. You've been evil for 3 years already, and you've gotten to the point where you're basically addicted to being mean to people. Yeah, that's not going to change overnight. So I think we're both predicting here that when we come back to Silent Night 2, she's going to be uber bitch too.
Agreed. How many unexplained electrical surges would you give this book?
It's a solid 2. If you're like a Fear Street aficionado and you're reading a lot of Fear Street books, this is definitely a book you should check out. Just because it stands out for having such a different character in Reva. It's definitely refreshing. It's still in that same Fear Street vein, but throws a nice little twist on it.
I'm giving it a 3 on my Fear Street scale, a 3 out of 5.
Okay, wow.
I like how it's different. I like how he had his extra pages and he actually did something with the characters. Because for Party Summer, we complained that he had characters that, like Craig, that we knew nothing about going in and nothing about going out.
Oh my god, right? The characters were all basically like cardboard cutouts in that book.
Right, and I feel like for this book, he actually fleshed them out, and I appreciated that.
He did take a lot of care.
Next up, we're going back to the original Fear Street series. It's going to be Fear Street First Date. So we actually have a reprint copy, so it has the really boring cover of a girl putting, I guess, lip liner on, and the caption says, "It may be her last." But looking at the original cover...
Oh my god.
Stark difference.
Holy crap. By the way, can we just use this moment as a little teachable moment? On the YouTube version, we're going to throw up the pictures to compare the two covers. Day and night, why do the reprints have such awful artwork, whereas the originals clearly hired a professional artist to paint an interesting picture? For each and every one of them, it's been a rather interesting, well-done picture. I mean, come on. Anyway, moving on.
So in the original cover, you have a girl and a boy. So the girl looks almost lifeless, and the guy looks like he's getting off on her dead body. It's actually really creepy. He looks really into it, and she looks dead. His hand is hovering over her neck, and the caption for this book is, "That's when he always kills them."
Holy shit. Yeah, that's the subtitle to First Date, so I guess this guy is just a serial first date murderer. Holy shit.
I think this book is about a guy that kills people on first dates.
What made you think that, Anna?
I don't know. I feel like the girl is probably the main character, and she unfortunately ends up going on a date with this guy. But he must be new, because there's no way there's a serial first date murderer in Shadyside, and we don't hear about him until like book 20 or something like that. So he has to be new. She has to be a girl that's been at Shadyside for a while. They go on a first date, and she might not make it out alive. But I think it's a male murderer, and I think there's been a female victim somewhere along the line, and I think that he does it by strangulation.
So I'm looking at this picture, and I'm seeing something. So he is reaching for her throat, but if you look at it a little more closely, that's his left hand. Where's his right hand? And you mentioned that she looks like she's kind of already dead. I think his right hand is where the murder weapon is. Some kind of stabbing is going on there. Now, it could be that he stabbed her with a knife, but I think the expression would be a lot more pain. So he might have injected her with some kind of drug, with a hypodermic needle, with his right hand. And that's why she's actually just kind of drifting off into long sleep at this point. That left hand, he's just catching her body, which is going to become quite limp very soon. So, again, I'm going to say male murderer. I agree with you. This is definitely, and I may live to regret this, this is definitely a male murderer here, and he's obviously got some kind of weird fetish going on where he is a sexual predator. Now, murder weapon, I'm going to say it's not strangulation. I'm going to go out on a limb and say whoever does die in this book, it's not going to happen by strangulation. I think we're going to get a little bit of drugs, and then we're going to get maybe an injection or maybe some kind of stabbing, but definitely not strangulation.
Murder victim is a
female.
All right, cool. Predictions locked and loaded.
Locked and loaded. All right, guys. Thank you again so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate all of your feedback and comments, and we'll see you again next time
when we review Fear Street First Date.
Peace.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another thrilling episode of RetRead Podcast.
If you like what you hear, give us a shout out.
If not, let us know why in the comments.
Don't forget to rate, review, comment, share, like, and subscribe.
You can follow us at RetRead Podcast on Twitter and Facebook.
Or send suggestions or fan mail to red.read.podcast@gmail.com.
Until next time.
Peace.